we often, and in fact the speakers address this, measure the barrier integrity of skin samples before we use them for IVPT. And there are different ways of measuring this property, and there's a chronological history of them, but all methods are available. So tritiated water, TWA, and conductivity, and others. Any thoughts on selection? If somebody's starting these studies, what is most recommended? That was a question from several of our attendees. Anyone? I think this is open to anyone on the panel.
I could say that we've really used the TWEL method, and it's fairly standardized. If you standardize it in your lab, it's been a good method, and it's very easy to do compared to the other methods.
Does everyone agree? And also, perhaps in addition to that, you mentioned the standardization of the method. How do you determine what the acceptable range is between acceptable samples and not acceptable samples?
I just want to say that as we get more knowledge about this area, that we would have more standardization potentially, but also that standardization may be different for different products, that you might have to tweak the system a bit for certain products. Things like API degradation at certain temperatures, things like that, and also the target goal for BE evaluation, like Howard mentioned, it's very different from using the IVPT for something else. But if you are using it for a BE, then there's a potential for tweaking the system even further, but allowing for detection differences, the ability to discern the difference between multiple formulations is going to be key.
So I would also say that, sorry, go ahead, Paul. I was just going to comment on the test.
Thank you. We need to keep in mind the intent of the integrity test is to measure integrity, whether the barrier is still intact and not damaged. It should not be used as a predictor of absorption for any subsequent molecule applied to the skin. There's sufficient data in the literature to suggest that anywhere between 15 and 20 grams per meter squared per hour is a suitable cutoff, where above that generally indicates true skin damage, and below that, an intact barrier.
Is barrier integrity different for different types of skin? For example, facial skin, when you have hair follicles going in deep into the skin, you may expect a different barrier integrity than non-facial skin.
Certainly, you bring up an important point that there is regional variation in transepidermal water loss. But if we're talking about integrity to damage, that usually demonstrates TWLs in the numbers of 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 100 values. And that would be independent of body location.
So, I think that the TEWL, which you find many of us speaking about right here, one of the real advantages of it is that it's relatively rapid. And in terms of the test procedure, it maintains the skin in its native physiological condition. It doesn't involve wetting the surface in any way. And so the skin surface stays dry, and you're really assessing the migration of water, which is what all the tests do, but you're able to do it relatively non-invasively. You don't affect the skin barrier in the process. And there are there are commercially available devices out there that can use it. The downside is that these different devices have different designs. And so, and many of them are designed very much for in vivo use. So when you put them on the skin in vitro, there are some rather technical considerations about the precision of the method relative to the kind of reading you'd get in vivo, because as you move some of them away from the skin, the reading can change. And so the height of your donor compartment that you're putting it on top of can impact it. So I think the issue here in terms of what's the correct cutoff, there are a lot of factors like Markham spoke about that may deal with the anatomical site, that may deal with the apparatus that you're using to do the TWL or any other method. And so it's a little bit, I think it's a little challenging to say that there's one right value and that everybody has to meet that regardless of the variations in the conditions of their test. That's why I'm a proponent of saying, utilize that test as implemented in your lab with your skin type, whether it's dermatomed or epidermal prep, whether it's one type of TWL meter or another or a different type of device, and then assess the population so you can get a sense of what the normal reading is among multiple donors and multiple replicates, and then figure out from there, as Paul said, when it comes to TWL, units of grams per meter squared per hour are conventional, and you might be in the range of 10, 15, maybe 5. But if you're getting above 20, if you're getting readings of 60 or 70, I think it's a pretty clear signal that you've got barrier damage there. So assess what the range is, figure out where you think readings above that are outside the normal range, and then take a piece of skin, intentionally damage it, and see whether your cutoff picks it up. If your cutoff doesn't pick it up as being damaged, then your cutoff may be too generous.
Yeah, and also mention that the prior skin history is important. Like if for example during the surgical procedure someone were using a razor to shave all the skin off, and there might be microabrasions to the skin, then maybe that's a skin sample that you don't want to use for your IVPT.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that there are considerations just in the handling of the skin. We want to try to avoid things that can damage the stratum corneum barrier, whether it's crystallization of ice on the surface, or handling it with pointy forceps, or using a blade across it, rather than maybe just a clipper on the if there's a little bit of hair that you need to get off.